Hello there, my name is Ksenia Smirnova, and now we will unveil the top news of recent days. While the Moscow performance called Putin's election has ended, I will not even name the numbers of results in voting for Putin because it could be 40% and it could be 120%. However, it is worth talking about the consequences of this performance for geopolitics. Currently, world politicians are divided into two camps. In one, the leaders of North Korea, Iran, China, Venezuela, Cuba and some Russian neighbors. All of them already congratulated the Kremlin dictator on his victory. The other part is currently competing in the fighting of the most decisive and humorous phrases regarding the Russian performance. Although, sorry, I must use a few numbers. After all, the Kremlin decided to hold elections in the occupied territories of Ukraine, on these destroyed and burnt lands of Donbass and southern Ukraine, where half of the cities are destroyed, and the majority of the population was either killed by the occupiers or left. So according to this information of the Central Voting Committee of Russia, in all these regions, the turnout turned out to be more than 90%. And more than 90% support Putin. Just look at how the elections were held there.
Ну что?
Посмотри, что происходит. И так целый день.
Ответь. Ответь.
In Russia itself, the regions, one in front of the other, drew numbers of anonymous support for Putin. I officially called the pro-Kremlin government of Chechnya, led by Kadyrov, as the best sycophants, more than 98% of support. This is despite the fact that the Chechens, as part of the Ichkeria units, together with the Russian Freedom Legion, the Siberian Battalion and the Russian Volunteer Corps, have been conducting a raids in the Belgorod region since last Wednesday. In the social networks of the Russian mass media, the hashtag Belgorod is Russia was even launched. But of course, now propagandists is talking about the appointment of Putin as Tsar. And what is the Tsar himself talking about? And Putin is scaring the world with nuclear weapons and the Third World War. But he doesn't say that putting the world on the verge of the Third World War is precisely his strategic goal, in order to then bargain for the maximum for an agreement not to start the Third World War.
There is a superstition. As soon as the situation at the front in the world and in Russia begins to deteriorate for Putin, the louder and more intense the talk of readiness to use nuclear weapons becomes. Force, as the last argument of the stupid, is Putin's signature style of communication. Propaganda of fear is still considered by the Kremlin to be the most effective tool of influence in implementing aggressive foreign policy strategies. Alexei Danilov, Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, on Facebook.
But while in the world, fear is only in propaganda, inside the country it manifests itself in all its glory. And this, by the way, is once again confirmed by these elections. Only those they wanted were admitted to voting ballots. And whoever they didn't want, they didn't let them in. Nadezhdin was simply not allowed in, Girkin was imprisoned, Navalny was simply killed. And by the way, after the election, Putin praised the opposition for its contribution to the high turnout. After all, the queues, which should have shown how many people are against Putin, were shown by all media as people's desire to vote in the elections. Therefore, it is necessary to look very carefully when and who filmed the video near the polling station or embassies. For example, the majority of Russians living in Lithuania voted against Vladimir Putin in the elections, said the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Lithuania, Gabrielius Landsbergis.
But it definitely cannot be called an election. It's a procedure that is supposed to resemble elections. Some might call it a reappointment, lacking any legitimacy. I'm glad that people outside the confines of political prison that is called Russia currently are able to express their opinions, such as, for example, Russians that voted in Lithuania. Just 3% of those who came to Russian embassy in Vilnius voted for Vladimir Putin. Others decided either to ruin the paper or to vote for any other candidate that was there on the ballot.
Well, now, not only in Belarus, but also in Russia, a self-proclaimed president is in power. And it is very interesting with whom to negotiate the end of the war. Not with the self-proclaimed leader of the country, because I can be like that too. Construction of the largest NATO military base in Europe has begun in Romania, reports Euronews. The size of a small city on an area of almost 3 square kilometers, the base will be able to permanently house up to 10,000 NATO soldiers and their families. The €2.5 billion project includes runways, weapon platforms, hangars for military aircraft, as well as schools, kindergartens, shops, and even a hospital. Work on the NATO base has begun with basic infrastructure, for example, roads and power grid, and construction of new runway parallel to the existing one will soon begin. They will be connected and the airport infrastructure will be developed in the eastern parts with new taxiways, parking lots and facilities for different types of aircraft. The government has allocated €2.5 billion for this project, which will turn the base in Constanta region into the most important NATO facility in Europe. In a new geopolitical context with a war on the border, base building thus strengthens NATO's eastern flank. The base will have a total perimeter of 30 kilometers and will be able to accommodate any type of combat equipment. Currently, there are about 5,000 military personnel at the air base. Most of them are American soldiers. Somehow, Putin's goal of moving NATO's borders away from Russia is not attainable. Everything happens absolutely the opposite. Sweden and Finland became members of the alliance. Ukraine will become a new base, is being built in Romania. This, once again, proves that what a bad geostrategist is in Kremlin. The German special services have prepared for the government an analysis of the military threats from Russia, which predicts that from 2026 it may attack the territory of NATO member states. According to the analysis of the special services of Germany, Russia is preparing for a large-scale conflict with the West, which is indicated by the reorganization of the Russian army, the movements of troops and the placement of missiles in the west of the country, as well as the increase in Russian weapons production. The latter could lead to Russia doubling its military power over the next 5 years compared to today, especially in the area of conventional weapons, according to a classified report. It can no longer be ruled out that Russia will attack at least parts of NATO's territory from 2026, for example, in the Baltic states or Finland's Business Insider reports. It emphasizes that the German services have not yet made such concrete statements in public. According to Business Insider, NATO headquarters also shares concerns about Russia's growing military power and further confrontation, but believes that this should not necessarily lead to the war. In particular, the publication quotes the assessment of the American Special Services, which in the medium term do not see the danger of a Russian attack on NATO and believe that the Russian armed forces will need another 5 to 8 years to restore the military power they had before the invasion of Ukraine. So let me remind you that in recent weeks, a number of European NATO countries have already warned about the risk of aggression by the Russian Federation in the nearest future. For example, German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius in January said that the alliance should prepare for a Russian attack on a NATO country within 5 or 8 years. Against these backgrounds, the Bundeswehr is developing a new comprehensive operation defense plan for the first time since the end of the Cold War, which takes into account the lessons of the full-scale Russian aggression against Ukraine. That concludes today's video. So thank you very much for watching. Stay updated, comment, like and sure subscribe to our UATV English channel for more news from Ukraine. Your support is really that matter. Goodbye.